lights go dim, it's time to find out what's within. Behind the camera, there's so much more. With Andy Games, let's explore. Behind the camera with Andy Games, meet the streamers, learn their names. Off the screen, who are they? Tune in now, don't delay.
Hello everybody and welcome to Behind the Camera with Andy Games, the podcast where we sit down with creative people from all across the world and let them share their journeys in their own words. It's a chance to get to know not just their art, but the stories that made them who they are. Today, in episode 44, our guest is Vince Quinn. Vince is the creative director of podcast production company SBX Productions and a former sports radio analyst. We take a deep dive into Vince's history, from his start in radio, understanding the industry, and eventually making the move into the world of podcast production. If you're new here, be sure to follow the show, leave a comment, a review, or share it with someone who'd appreciate these stories. All of that really helps us grow. But now, here's the interview. Vince, welcome to Behind the Camera with Andy Games. Absolute pleasure to have you on the show today. How are we doing today?
I'm great, man. I'm great.
I love to hear it. So you are the creative director of SBX Productions, but let's take a step further back from that. So before this, you spent 10 years in corporate sports radio, and you had some hosting duties on a nationally syndicated show. Take us back to the start of all this. Like, how did you get into broadcasting media? Like, how did you know that this was what you were meant to do?
Yeah, so I had no idea that I could do this, and it was like an oh duh moment when it happened. So I was a sports obsessive, just absolutely loved football. I had jerseys from players all across the league. I played Madden like every single day of my life for 6 years. So I was all about it, and being in Philly where everybody's a diehard Eagles fan, I've got Eagles stuff behind me as we talk. Like it was just one of those things where I'm just a diehard fan. It's just something I love. And I watched a lot of television around sports, but I never considered the idea of doing sports radio. I actually did a sports blog, and I was doing a sports podcast, but I just never, and I think part of this was downplaying myself, imposter syndrome, all the different things, right? Yeah. I never looked at it like, oh, I can be doing the show with these guys, and I should be working in a station like this and getting on these big outlets. And so the way I truly got tied into it was I needed a job out of college. I was working at a pizza shop. I did not like working at that pizza shop. I wanted something else to do, and my uncle called me out of the blue and was like, hey, I know that they're hiring for a sales job in radio. Are you interested in applying for that? And I said, no, I'm not, but thank you very much. And I hung up the phone. And then he called back a couple days later, and he's like, yeah, well, they actually have a promotions position available. So in that case, I'd be going to events and spinning the wheel and handing out T-shirts and all that kind of stuff. So that's how I got started. And once I got there, it was like, oh, this is a sports radio station, and I work at this sports radio station. Like, maybe I could actually do something here. But honestly, it really wasn't until I was a year in on working at a sports radio station where I legitimately saw myself as having a chance to actually get on air and build a career doing it.
Oh, that's amazing. And it's quite interesting to me because, you said you had the sports podcast before that, and that wasn't necessarily the thing that kind of led you into sports radio. It was like another thing, more in a more personal facing role. Like that's incredibly interesting. Now I have to say, you certainly have the voice of someone who's been on the radio. Like, you can tell that you have that kind of experience. I'm sure you hear that all the time. Is that something that you've always just naturally had, or do you think that that's something that you just worked on? And obviously being in radio for 10 years, you kind of have to have that kind of inflection on your voice. Like, what's the sort of what's behind that?
So I think radio really amplified the way that I speak, but it is the way that I speak. So the sing-songy nature of everything that I do, my dad speaks that way. He worked in cars for 40 years, so it wasn't one of those things where I suddenly, I spoke in a very plain way. And then once I got on the air, then it all changed. It was really, I had a certain way of speaking. I generally spoke all the time anyway. I was always at parties and out and about and just with people. I'm a social guy by nature. So I was just doing all of that. And then once I got into radio, then it was the other things that I started to learn in terms of ways to emphasize things where you lean into dramatic pauses and stuff like that, so
Yeah.
all of those other vocal tricks I really picked up in time, but the basic way of speaking, and I tend to spend a lot of time explaining stuff. I just think one of the fundamental problems that people have is communication. They don't understand fully what you're saying, or you don't fully understand them. So I go out of my way to like very much explain what I'm saying. And so with all of that, yeah, it just got enhanced through the radio because you have to do a 4-hour show. That's a lot of time. And to do that multiple days a week, it's just a crazy thing to do. So there was a lot of vocal tricks that came with it. But yeah, ultimately, this is generally how I spoke, and radio just took it up a couple notches.
So really a match made in heaven then when you put it like that. Like that's brilliant. So in terms of like the show that you hosted, like what was the show like? What was it like sort of being at the desk hosting the show, obviously getting your timings right, but what was like the nature of the show that you hosted?
Yeah, so I was a sore thumb of sorts when I was doing the show compared to other people on the station, because a lot of times people are approaching it as I'm a fan, and as a fan, I'm talking about our team,
Yeah.
me and the audience, and it's us together talking about our team as fans. And I didn't see it that way. That was not how I did this. I didn't look at it as I need to be a diehard homer. It was I love the sport.
Yeah.
And I happen to be a fan of the local teams. Those are the teams that I support and I grew up with, and I like the players. And frankly, I'm lucky in Philly because I like the organizations. Being a football fan in particular, Broner's a good guy. Just today, as we're doing all of this, like he donated $50 million to autism research.
Oh, wow.
So he's building a whole autism institute, like all these crazy things. But he comes from in the world of sports owners, he's at the top of the scale. You know what I mean? Like they could get pretty grimy and dirty and ugly there. So I think we're lucky that it's a good organization,
Yeah.
and they win a lot. And so they've always been compelling in a lot of ways, which makes it easy to root for them and follow them. But I always saw it as I love the league. I love the sport. I'm an analyst. I'm going to be critical. And I'm not just going to lean into everything needs to be for the home team and in service to them. It's not, that because I know they're not listening to me. So, hey, I'm going to be objective, and I want to give you the best analysis that I can, but I want to make it entertaining while I do it. And so locally, that got me into a lot of trouble because I wasn't a fan and I could be critical of the team, so that kind of thing, it caused issues, and people would get mad at me and like genuinely hate me and ask where I'm from as if I'm not local. And it would get crazy at times. It would
Wow.
it got pretty dark occasionally. So that's just from commenting about the team. But eventually, once I got the move to national, it changed a lot, because then the audience is entirely different, and they're more like me, where they're not a fan of the team that I'm talking about or the player that I'm talking about. And a lot of times they're haters of that player or that team. So you get a more neutral approach to what the topics are, and you get so much more freedom in terms of the kinds of topics that you can talk about. So rather than having to try to get some national thing and shoehorn it in as a local topic because I thought that was a good thing to talk about, instead I could just talk about the national thing and do it with an audience that got that. And like that kind of freedom was great. It was I love doing a national show so much more than I love doing a local show.
I can imagine, because like obviously when you are like a radio host or a journalist or anything sort of in that sort of similar media position, you have to kind of maintain that there's no bias. You're neutral, impartial to everything. But when you're local, especially in a place where there's only one team and everybody, and the passion of sports fans, it's unparalleled, I think. And of course, kind of have to maintain your journalistic integrity, but like obviously if the direction of the station was a fan-based radio, sometimes that just doesn't kind of mold. But like at the same time, you're doing a job, but you're kind of speaking in a most professional way, and I can imagine it's probably tough to find that kind of balance. So I can understand why it was better going on to national, where it sounded like that was a more natural fit for you.
For sure. And it was cool too, because over time I started to get more freedom, like doing the late, especially just by nature of doing late night and overnight, things like that, weekends. That gave me the freedom to experiment a little bit more. And so because for me, I like cracking jokes. I like having a good time. I wanted to make it fun. I was goofy. I would do these bits where I would record parody songs, and I'm not a good singer, but I would record like a verse and a chorus and do a parody song and throw that bit together. So I always wanted to experiment, and I got my hands on a lot of different work over the years, being a producer and an engineer and climbing the ranks. So and wanting to do comedy. I mean, I did comedy for a little while. I was working at comedy clubs and stuff. So I had a lot of experience. I want to bring all of that to the table to be a truly top of the line, entertaining 4 hours of radio. And to do that, the biggest problem was with some level of freedom with it was I didn't have the support to do it.
Yeah.
In terms of, I didn't have a dedicated producer that was a part of my show. I didn't really have a production budget. If I was doing any kind of work like that, it was on my own dime. And honestly, you weren't getting paid to do a lot of different things. I'm not getting paid to watch games. I'm not getting paid to think about all of these different teams. I'm really, truly getting paid to do the show, the 4 hours of the show itself, which paid as 6 because it was a union gig. But that was it. Nothing else was expected. So it was like to do a good show and have it align with the amount of work that you need to do to have a good show versus what you got paid to do that. It was discouraging, man. It was honest. It was a very frustrating thing to deal with, and that it's part of the reason that I left. It's not the only reason, but it's definitely part of it.
No, of course. Like, so was it a case where you just didn't really have that kind of creative control that you might have wanted in that sort of time period to be able to sort of put a piece of yourself into the show? And obviously, like, because if you're on radio, it's about listener retention, that's like ratings and everything like that. But obviously, I think it does, a lot of it comes down to the presenter, but then obviously you kind of have to put in your own bit. But how much creative control did you really have in your show, despite obviously everything that you wanted to do? How much did you really have compared?
So I will say that I had a lot of freedom. They didn't dictate that I talk about certain topics, and they didn't yell at me too often. I got yelled at occasionally, but it was very dumb stuff. So, for example, I made a joke, or one time I was in the middle of the night, I'm killing time, and I had recently been to a very boring wedding. So the ceremony of the wedding was incredibly boring, and being raised Catholic, I spent maybe 10 minutes on the air just talking about how boring Catholic weddings are as a Catholic. And this upset so many people, apparently. So they got all these angry calls and emails or whatever. And I got yelled at for talking about Catholic weddings being boring. Another time I got yelled at because it was Thanksgiving. It was the day after Thanksgiving. So I'd just done the overnight from Thanksgiving night into the Friday after. And it's like 5 in the morning. And I start talking about pardoned turkeys because I'm like, who makes this choice? Is it from the same farm? Like, do they get to live forever? Does this apply to their kids? Like, I had questions about pardoned turkeys, and people were calling in, and it was funny. Like, people were laughing on the phone as they're asking me stuff about it with their own questions and answers to some of the questions that I had. And it was this really good, goofy energy for a Friday morning when nothing's going on. Yeah. So I love the show. I think it's a really great episode and a great example of like what I'm about. And I get a call the next day being like, well, you spent too much time on those pardoned turkeys. It's like, was it entertaining or not? And the frustrating thing for me, ultimately, it boiled down to radio. In a lot of ways, corporate radio is a front runner industry. Yep. They are not going to make risks on you building a brand and developing an audience. They want people that have the audience already. But if you're going to do things that are outside of the norms to go and build it, they're not going to ride with you because they've got sponsors. They're very particular about that stuff. They don't want you as a nobody rocking the boat. Yeah. So to go and experiment and do goofy things like that and not have sales support where someone was dedicated to my show to get me sponsors and things like that. Like, I had no extra money coming in. I'm not getting promoted at different events or my social media account or anything like that. So I wasn't getting any help building my own audience. I was getting very mild and like very, very, very occasional pushback on what I did. But it also meant I didn't quite fit the mold exactly the way they wanted. And so looking around, it's just like, well, I can do a lot of this stuff in other places. I've got the tools. I know how to run a show. I know how to make an engaging topic. I know what it takes to develop some of those things. I can teach people how to make good topics and things like that. So I just got to a point where I said, you know what? Like, I can either die in radio and hope that they just love me enough and the corporate is willing to ride with me, which I didn't have any reason to believe that, and I would get the proper support that I'd want someday down the line, or I could get out of there and just figure it out. Like, I was 30, 31. So to have a national show at that point was a massive accomplishment.
Yeah.
And I just figured, yeah, I don't want to die here is really what it was. I saw too many people that, you know, in their 40s, 50s, part-time gigs here and there, working in multiple stations, running around like crazy, no control over their schedule, and just really no control over their lives in a sense, right? Like, you don't have stable income, so you don't have committed hours every single week. Like, it was just hard. And I was like, I don't want to live that life. I respect those guys that do it because they love it so much and they decided to go all in, and that's the life they chose. Like, no judgment from me.
Yeah.
But looking ahead and saying, if I lived a life like that, would I be happy with myself? I wouldn't be. So I really just didn't have a choice but to leave.
No, completely fair. And it's a shame how the sort of corporate world works like that, where they're almost afraid to take a chance because they're protected by their sponsors, and obviously it goes high up to like board and everything like that. And it's just a shame. And like, to compare it to radio here, so I'm in Northern Ireland, and like, our national radio as like a country is essentially local radio as well, because it's such a small country, and obviously America is like, you know, unfathomable in size comparatively, you know. But yeah, so like, our sort of local slash national radio, like, we have like multiple different stations, but they do have that like element of fun, goofiness, just having a laugh and just sort of going on tangents, talking like things like you say about Catholic weddings being boring. And you know what? I 100% agree. I've been to my fair share of them, and I agree. They are like, you sit there for about 45 to 50 minutes, and for really something that takes like 5 or 10 minutes, like, I got married in a humanist slash spiritualist ceremony, and it was 25 minutes, and that was enough, right?
There you go.
Yeah, exactly. So now, obviously, the topic of Catholic weddings here where I live would be fairly controversial, but I mean, there were so many people who would agree, and I think it's like, it's good to kind of have that. It's good to sort of have those little sort of moments, because, and to me, like, now this is obviously me being quite idyllic about this, but like, to me, it kind of says, you know, if a corporate radio was to sort of like take that chance and just let you be you, it should, in theory, open the door to like you getting your own sponsors, other people reaching out who might not necessarily have like felt like they were a fit for corporate radio before, like other sort of entities, and then it kind of just like helps growth. But obviously, I guess it probably just comes down to the size of just the fact it's national radio going across the whole of America. It's like, only so many people could possibly relate to it, or whatever it may be, where the scale difference to here, it's like, no matter where you're from in the country, everybody can relate. And then, but obviously you do get like the sort of the corporate radio side here would be BBC, and you know, they it's that sort of thing, you know, you talk about like they just want the cookie cutter kind of reporters, analysts and everything, and it's no fun. It's like, you wouldn't, you know, you could listen to the radio 5 days a week, and you wouldn't know if it's the same person every single day, because it's just the same thing getting poured out. And like, I do think radio does need to be fun, because it's engaging, and it's like part of a lot of people's routines. So it's totally understandable why at a certain point you were just like, yeah, this that isn't for you, you know.
Yeah, if anything, they've actively been driving personality out of radio for a very long time now. You go to any music station, it's all automated voice tracks. Everything's pre-recorded. They're killing morning shows. I would walk by studios where the lights were off and it was just a computer running, and that was it. Not a person in the room, just a playlist essentially on play, and that was it. So that they spent all this time going, okay, we're going to cut all these budgets and all this different stuff, but they never developed audience. They didn't understand what it truly took to develop an audience. They never made the investments to do it. And when people have the opportunity to go and build things, they'd rather crush that thing rather than take the risk and stand by talent and give them an opportunity. And so I like a lot of the people that are the bigger personalities in radio, they came up from a time before everything was truly fully corporate and owned by six companies or whatever. So they had opportunities to take risks, fight with management, or have management back them and build that brand. And then the corporate entities, then they were established. They were able to maintain these guys who could take the risk because they were an established brand name. But if you can't take the risks and you're not willing to invest in people to go and build that, then what do you have? And that's why all these people are in podcasting or are on Twitch or all these other places, because that's where you have the creative freedom of expression, and you're not put in all these old dated boxes of how radio operates, of 4-hour day parts and stuff like that. So you can build a show that truly makes sense for you and your audience. So I think on some level, radio's just aged, and it's not a medium anymore that is modern and where people want to be. But I also don't think they did anything to facilitate it. So they've really shot themselves in the foot.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like, I definitely think it's a generational thing at this point. Like the generation like above us, for example, is probably more suited towards them because it hasn't changed, as you say. It hasn't changed in so many years. And like, obviously with local radio, yes, that's the sort of thing. I would probably argue that is kind of keeping it alive in terms of a younger demographic, maybe, but that's only because they have that kind of more creative freedom. It's local, it's relatable. But as you say, yeah, this is why people are getting into podcasting and things like that. So speaking of, you, after leaving corporate radio, you founded SBX Productions and you are the creative director. So what can you tell us about this company, and what can you tell us about how you got into it and where it's took you today?
Yeah, so it's a totally different world than everything that I was doing. As much as it sounds similar on the surface, it's a podcast production company. But everything that we do is about helping businesses use a podcast as a way to monetize. And when I say monetize, I don't mean get sponsors, because that's what a lot of people think about when they think about a podcast. My whole thing is, you're a business owner. You started this podcast to grow your business. Let's use this to help you sell more. And that should be the entire strategy for whatever your product is, your service, whatever. The show is designed to help you sell more and grow your business. So let's do that. Forget all the big audience. Like, let's be very specific of what the show is about. Let's talk about all of your topics and really craft those. Let's be strategic about the kinds of people that we invite onto the show, and then how we get all of this content and repurpose it across all these different platforms. Like, let's really think about these things and be methodical, because it's modern organic marketing. That's really what it boils down to. So how do we do that for your business, especially for people that they are the business, they don't have a major budget, they can't get a lot of help. That's part of why they did the podcast. They believe in the medium and they have a good personality, but they just haven't been able to put all of the pieces together. So my whole job is, how do I create alignment between your podcast and your business so that you can make more money? That's really it.
Yeah, I think it's a good business model because podcasting is, you'll know this yourself, podcasting is such a powerful tool. Like, it really, I mean, there's millions and millions out there, of course, and people might say it's a saturated market, but the truth is, it's not. It's not. There's just more choice for people to listen to, and you never really know, and I hate to use the term, but where the hidden gems are. And I think with every podcast, there is something for somebody to take out of. If it's at least one person, then I think it's definitely doing what it absolutely should. And I certainly think that you don't see it enough with smaller businesses sort of undertaking it. And like, especially because we're now like well embedded into the digital age that we're in. And like, as we say, it's a powerful tool, like, but not enough people are using it. So like, how do you sort of bring companies in to be like, okay, this is what you could achieve based on XYZ?
Yeah, so it really comes down to first off understanding what their actual goals are for a business and the kind of resources that they have. So, depending on that, I'll spend a lot of time talking with them and I really want to understand the inner workings of their business. I
Mhm.
want to know if they've got different courses. I want to know the kinds of clients that they have. I want to know how they typically get those clients. I want to know if they have great success stories. What are those stories? Like as much as I can truly dig into them and their history and what makes them a specialist in their field. Like, why do you do this work? What makes you great at it? What makes you different than other people that do the same kind of work? Like, I work with business coaches. So there's a lot of them. And what makes you different? I work with a real estate agent. What makes you different than other people? So you need to define all of those things. And from there, everything really becomes common sense
Yeah.
because it's, hey, okay, you're a certain kind of business coach. You're working with the executive side and you're teaching executives to be a better leader. Great. Well, we know exactly the kinds of topics to talk about because you know exactly what kind of customer that you're talking to. You know an idea of who to invite onto your show because you're talking to executives of businesses of a certain size that have certain kinds of issues. And you have an idea of what kind of industries have the money to do that, have the interest in doing that. So it becomes easier to pinpoint everything and then figure out how to put it on all these different platforms, especially to start based on what they already do. So if you have a newsletter, great. Let's repurpose it. Let's also promote the show in the newsletter. So let's use that transcript to fuel it and give you the content, and then also promote the show and find ways to weave that in. Let's make sure if you're posting on LinkedIn all the time, we're using this as a way to generate content for your LinkedIn. And so by tying all of those things together, again, it's just at some point very quickly, it feels obvious that they should be doing it. And that's really the art form of it is it's just a natural extension of you and what you do and what your business is about and regularly demonstrating that to people. So the more that I know about them up front, the easier it is to convince them that it's just the obvious move.
Yeah, of course. And when you break it down like that, like, it's simply just another medium that they can put out to advertise themselves and their services and their knowledge of what they do and what they are trying to provide, but also consolidating every other piece of sort of information and, you know, uh, platforms that they have and putting it out there. Like when you break it down, it does sound so simple and effective, and it's incredible. So, what sort of then businesses would you? Do you sort of like cater to certain businesses, or is it just any, but do you kind of get more of certain business types compared to others, for example?
Yeah, so right now I get a lot of coaches and consultants, so that can be a lot of different shapes. But it's people who they are the business, they need to build relationships all the time, and they're dealing with clients personally, so they have to run the business, promote the business, and like do the work. So it's a ton for them to manage, and they obviously need help. So that's an easy lane. And like I said, real estate is one of those places. Leadership coaching is another. I talked to somebody who short-term rentals, which is a side of real estate. So like that's a lot of it. Somebody in the photography business, they help photographers, but same thing, coaching, consulting. So that's a lot of it. It can apply pretty much anywhere though. It's just what is your intent? And that's the beauty of it. So the cool thing is when I'm working with all these different kinds of industries or styles of show, ultimately when you're trying to piece this all together, there are things that you can say by doing the show. Just from the fact that the show exists, your business is better off.
Yep.
And that's the beauty of it is, okay, well, you're working on your marketing messaging all the time and getting to try all of these different messages through the content and see what hits. You can review the data and see what people listen to. You can see the posts, which ones did well and got engagement, which ones didn't, which episodes got downloaded, vice versa. So all that. You're building relationships actively by inviting people onto your show. You're getting more posts up than you did before. It's increasing your awareness. So it's a cool thing. And that's the beauty is it fits those principles of easy automatic wins because the show exists can apply to really any industry. And then it's just that top line, or I should say bottom line of where is the money from this and how much am I making and how does it support that? Like that becomes the truly business specific side of it. But yeah, anybody should be getting wins off the bat. And if they're not thinking about that show or their show that way, they're not thinking about it the right way.
No, of course. Like, so obviously people go into podcasting for so many different reasons, whether it just be for a bit of fun or to just get stuff off their chest. And sometimes people just do that. And like, that's great. But then obviously, yeah, there is like it is good to see like the business side of things getting into it, because you look at like LinkedIn, for example, like you mentioned LinkedIn, you see there's a lot more podcasts coming up on LinkedIn, from global entities where they'll talk about like specialist subjects with getting guests on, experts and stuff like that. So that kind of like obviously fits into like everything you're saying, but like obviously this is on a sort of different level, and I think it's a good sort of example to follow almost. Do you ever have to sort of trying to how do I word this? Like, do people ever sort of come to you but they're unsure about starting a podcast, like they don't have any experience with it and they sort of need that kind of bit of guidance on how do we do this? What's the sort of, step by step? Is that a service that you provide within SBX?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, a lot of people don't know how to start a show because there's so much work that goes into it. And how do you come up with the concept? You're creating all these logos and the language around the show and figuring out what the formatting is and the topics. And plenty of people don't know what an RSS feed is.
Yeah.
So what hosting service to use? Am I doing video or not? Yeah, I mean, there's a million questions about it. And I, over time, built out an entire process explicitly for all of that. So the way I broke it down is there's really 9 steps. And through those 9 steps, it allows you to, and starting with picking a consistent day and time that you're doing this show so you can just actively think about it and you're always putting attention to it one way or another. And then ultimately guiding people through the strategy of just why are we doing this show? What does it look like on an episode to episode basis? Let's do a test episode, building out the elements, getting to launch. Like it really covers everything. And on the high level, I'm fully hands-on and doing all of that work with the person. So I'm building the things for them. I'm managing all of that, creating everything, developing it. And on the low end of the spectrum, I just give them the form. And that's, for marketing, you get all these free handouts.
Yeah.
So for me, that is a free handout. You want a free guide? No problem. Here's my 9 steps to launch. Go check it out. If you want to meet with me, here's my link to set up a call and we'll go from there. But yeah, I always want to give people the information because especially as a business owner, a lot of times they follow the entertainment blueprint, which is, oh, we'll just get out there and wing it and you'll figure it out. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it for that side of it. But when you're doing it for your business and for your marketing, you want to be a whole lot more methodical because you don't have the time. So making sure that your time is spent the right way by starting on the right foot is everything. Otherwise, you're going to quit after 3 episodes and blame the format, and it's not the format's fault.
Yeah, absolutely. And, most podcasts don't generally make it after 3 episodes. Most people will just kind of, if it doesn't go the way they thought it would, like, which 90% of the time is, I think it's going to be an overnight success. But the problem is it's something that takes years and years to, well, not necessarily years and years, but a long time to really kind of get off the ground, to really find your feet. And it's like constantly a learning curve. Like every single episode, and you, like you say, you'll know this yourself, like every single episode you do, it's like, okay, I could have done this a little bit different, or maybe I should implement this into the next one. And then, you go into the nitty gritty, like, what's my opening going to be, logos. You start just thinking about all these different things. And when it comes to like brands, and you mentioned something about like the entertainment side of things, like I think a brand doesn't necessarily need to be entertaining, but obviously do they sort of think that they might have to be because mainstream podcasting is almost associated with entertainment, or is it just something that they just not a case, it's not a case where they're just thinking, okay, we're trying to sell something here, this is what we do?
Yeah, so you know what the funny thing is? People tend to find this terrible, unhelpful middle ground all the time when they get the styles of podcasting conflated, because they don't go full tilt on an entertainment show, which on some level I would support. It's a hard line to do, but if you're going to design it for, hey, here's a show that is built for a really large audience, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with our product directly, but it's related. And so by sponsoring this show that can really blow up and get a big audience, we've really won, because we have, entertainment and sponsorship, and we're advertising our product through that. So you're a sponsor yourself. That is a lane. I think there's an avenue for that. Nobody really does it. What happens is they end up doing a show that's a general business show, and they just talk about entrepreneurs to come on and you get just this cycle of guest after guest after guest. And it's like, when you're doing it for the business, you got to find these ways to talk about what your business is. And it's really, how do you do solo episodes and have compelling topics for 20 minutes and do that? And then when you're getting to these guest interviews, what are the specific things that they can provide to your audience? Don't say yes to everybody. Say yes to the few select people that truly can add something to the conversation, and to you might be a strategic partner. Because, hey, this person really knows their space. For example, I'm not doing podcast advertising. So if you wanted to go and advertise on a bunch of different other shows and explore those networks and how to do that, I would love to learn more about it. Like, let's talk. I've got some ideas, but I'm not an agency like that. I'm not going to create your ad for you and place it for you. But if I knew somebody like that who does that kind of work, that could be a very good conversation. Maybe I would want to bring them on and my audience would learn something from it, and I'm learning something from it. That's valuable. But finding that kind of specificity, yeah, it just tends to be, everybody thinks guests are going to grow their show, and that broad nature of, I'm just going to have guests from everybody, makes them think that's going to grow it. And so it's just not how it works. Guests don't bring their audience more often than not. So you have to build around building your own thing and building the audience around you.
100%. I couldn't agree more. I think that's a trap that people fall into more often than not. Like I know myself, I can say personally that whenever I started out in my first, like, say 20, 25 episodes, I would have told people, oh, I've got this person coming on. People would be like, oh my God, that's huge. This is gonna take off. And I'm like, is it? You know,
Yeah.
like, I'll wait. I'll look at the analytics after, and then we'll see, right? And it's like you say, more often than not, they don't bring their audience with them. You know, they 100% don't, and nor do people have to. Nor, you know, is there a sort of like obligation for people to do that. It's you know, people are there to obviously promote themselves. They're there to, you know, like, many different reasons, you know, but I absolutely love that misconception sometimes that when you get a guest on, and I mean, I don't know, did you sort of have that sort of idea yourself whenever you ran your sports podcast as well?
Yeah, it was interesting because for the sports show, a lot of times I would have guests on my show, but I didn't expect them necessarily to give me a bump. I just hoped that they would be compelling on the show. If anything, I was trying to find people that didn't have a major following because I wanted them to be my go-to person and build that relationship and make my show unique. That was the fight. I didn't want my guests on every other show, and I didn't want to take guests that were on every other show.
Yep.
So and it was frustrating because there were times where I would find a guest, we'd have a great chemistry, it was really good, and it was the only place that was happening. But then the other shows would find out about that person from listening to my show and would invite them on. And I'm like, oh, well, there goes that thing that I've got. You know what I mean? So they would go from me to the other bigger time slots, which I don't blame them for doing. And I don't necessarily blame the other shows either for bringing those people on. I was a rotational nights, weekends, overnights, whatever. A lot of times. So it was natural for them to go, oh, well, Vince found somebody really good. Let me go bring them on. So yeah, it was very frustrating. It drove me nuts, honestly. But that was really the goal. Is I just wanted compelling people and people who were invested in me. You know, they thought the conversation was good with me, and they wanted to come on the show again and again and have those conversations with me because they knew that I respected their opinion. I was giving them a platform that they didn't typically have. And they were putting in the work and compelling in their own right and made my show better.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting point that you make, like giving them a platform that they might not necessarily have, because what I've kind of found over the last 12 months of doing this is sometimes the people who've never done podcasts before are the better talkers, are the more compelling, the more just naturally gifted storytellers, and the chemistry is like better sometimes. I don't know what it is. Sometimes people are just made for it, but then I get from like their perspective, it's one of them things where they just have to be themselves. They don't have to kind of you know, sort of tune a few dials to sort of be the host of something to, you know, it's but I've found that interesting. Like my top viewed episode of Behind the Camera is by somebody who, it was their first ever podcast. And that's like sitting right at the top of the pile and has done for about 9 months now. Like, and I just think that's like an incredible achievement because of some of the other people I've had on. And it just kind of, it's testament to what we were talking about before, where the guests don't necessarily matter who it is. That doesn't bring you the numbers. It's sort of, it comes kind of how you promote it and how other people promote it, I think, at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's definitely promotion and trust, right? If people are going along for the ride and they know that you're delivering on what you provide, they'll keep coming back.
Yeah.
So for me, I mean, I started my podcast for my business. So everything that we talked about earlier with doing a show to grow your business, I did all those things for me. And I did that starting in October of last year, even though I've really been doing this business for like 5 years now. I've been in podcasting full time, but I just got around to doing a show myself for the business. So when I first started doing the show, I only had 10 downloads per.
Yeah.
I wasn't getting anything, right? And that's me as a former nationally syndicated, all these different, like totally different audience, totally different topic of conversation. And I had to build everything from the ground up. And what's happened is slowly each month, a few more people listen and a few more people listen. And then I look today and I'm on track right now to have my best month ever. And last month was my best month ever. And the month before that was my best month ever. And like, it just keeps slowly growing because I'm consistent. I'm dedicated to a certain space. People know that I'm all about it. And when I bring a guest on, they're trusting me to bring somebody to the table that can give them value. So that's it. They don't care if this person's been on other shows or if they're famous. It's just, is the information good? Is it helping me? Is it getting me where I want to go? And knowing that that's my whole goal and that's all the audience's goal is, it makes it easier because, yeah, I don't care if you're famous. Do I trust what you say? Is it useful to my audience? And that's all it has to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with that, it kind of comes with it. It's like the audience that you have, it's your core audience, for example, they're watching your podcast or listening to your podcast because of you, the host. And the guests that you have on, it's like you say, they have that trust. It doesn't matter who you bring on, but they're, because they trust you, you're the host, they want to watch you and they know kind of what you can bring to the table. And then obviously you get like a smaller percentage that might come in because of the guests that you have. But yeah, like it's I couldn't agree more, because I think from, you know, in my personal perspective, I get a lot of people who come to me like, oh my God, like, you know, the podcast is going so well, you're doing this, that, and the other, you know, you're getting all these amazing guests on, everything. And for me, it's one of those things where like the numbers don't necessarily always add up to that, but it's like, but I think if people are talking about it in that sense, that's kind of as much of an achievement for me as possible. Like, because I changed the format of this about 4 months ago. I used to do this like live all the time. Like I used to do it live, stream it on Twitch, and then I stopped. I stopped because like the nature of the guests changed, and I wanted to sort of make it a little bit more professional, put a bit more production into it, and just wanted to change it up a bit. And then the views took a dive almost. So it was like rebuilding from that, but like it was like where the views dropped, more people were talking about it. So it was kind of one of those things where it was like, I'll happily take this. I'll happily take this because more people know about it. And that's kind of, I think that's a good sort of scope for growth in any aspect of podcasting.
Yeah, you want people who are truly committed to the product.
Yeah.
That's it. Like the faith and commitment is everything, because that's all you've got, right? Do you have people that genuinely care about what you've got, or is it very flimsy and they'll leave you at a moment's notice? And so that's a huge thing. You want to develop trust, and you want to have a sense of, you know, in certain aspects, like a relationship.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I've heard this guy speak so many times at length. And when you have all these conversations with all these different people, you know, the cool thing as an interviewer is you get to reveal a lot of different parts of yourself and life experiences and all of that. So the way that you unfold for people over time and they truly get to know you is a really cool thing. So yeah, that's really what it's all about. And that's the beauty and the uniqueness of it, is what you can provide as a host and putting yourself in the conversation and sharing all of that. And to some degree, to just go back a little bit, when you've got a guest on and it's their first time ever being on a podcast, that's a time where that person may share the show, and people who are a fan of that person, they will listen, potentially, because they've never heard that person speak on a podcast before. And it's this fun little goofy thing. Hey, did you hear the Bill's on a podcast? No, really? Bill? Really? That's awesome. Let me go check that out. Like then those people do get invested in it, and they can approach it in a new way. So yeah, like there's cool things like that in terms of building that bond with people. And that's what it should be really for, because you can get basic information you can get anywhere. It's not new, so it's easy to find. Everybody's got ChatGPT and all that stuff. Like you got to be a person. You've got to have like true insight. And those are the things that set you apart.
Oh yeah, absolutely. 100%. And everything you just said there is literally exactly what happened with my most played episode. That is exactly how that went down. Like, and but everything else as well, like what you say is so true, because when you do like a sort of interview based podcast, you have to keep it as informal as you possibly can. Like it's just a conversation. Yes, there's like question and answer sort of basis to it, but at the same time, like you say, when you're the host, you get to like share sort of like anecdotes based on what your guest is talking about, so that kind of adds that back and forth, and empathy and relatability. I think it comes down to it's like a massive important thing, I think, to these types of podcasts anyway, at least. And because sometimes people just like to hear stories. Like sometimes people like to hear stories, like to hear people's experiences. And I think as long as there's something or somebody to take from it, I think that's like one of the more important things, at least with what I do anyway. But so speaking of your own podcast, based around SBX, you have the podcast It's Not Just Talking. What can you tell us about this? As you said, you've been doing this since around last year. What's the sort of basis around the podcast? Is it sort of centralized around SBX, or is it a little sort of different, along more parallel to it?
Yeah, so it's slowly becoming more and more completely tied together. And what I mean by that is, when it started, it's been, let's talk about podcast production for businesses and all the different things around strategy and the basic ways you can repurpose content. And I was bringing guests onto the show that when you do things like Podmatch, you get these people who are professionals in a certain space. And what I decided was up front, I wanted to develop business, right? I need clients. That's the game. So I said, okay, I'm going to get business people on who have a podcast. That is my number one requirement. If you do not have a podcast, I will not have you on the show. And by getting people that were an expert in some area of business, I would talk to them and say, hey, well, you're an expert in A, B, or C. So let's talk about that for 20 minutes. And then let's talk about, on the other side of it, what it was like when you started the podcast for your business. What are the things you learned along the way? How does it incorporate into your business? And how do you use that expertise that you have? And how did that show through your business? Yeah. So, and your podcast. So that was the kind of stuff that I was doing up front. And now that I've had a little bit more time to actually do the show, process it a little bit, see what people view and what they don't view, because from the other side, with guests and everything, guest episodes are my worst episodes. Oh. It's just the truth. They just don't do as well. And all the things where it's me talking for 10, 15 minutes, people tend to click on those. So that was not shocking, but it was a good reinforcement of things. So seeing all of that, I got to a stage where I said, okay, well, what I want to do is I want to bring people in even further. And what I'm doing now is, as much as I still have some guests on the show, it's really more specifically, I'm not talking about that business thing just to sort of tie it in. It felt a little forced. Yeah. It's now I want to start moving towards, let's talk about very specific podcast things that you can inform my audience about and I have questions about, and that's it. Like, I'm getting podcast experts or specialists in whatever way, and I'm starting to have those conversations from the perspective of, I'm the business owner with a podcast and I want to grow my business. So now it's really tight, and where it's truly where it is the business. I'm going more for a reality element on some level. I'm telling people about the numbers of my show and what the growth has looked like for that show and the exact strategies we've done of how we approach the show. I have a whole episode that's about how our entire approach when we started the show was not about downloads at all. I literally did not care about downloads. I didn't expect downloads. I didn't think that was going to be a thing. And they weren't. We had, 5 downloads, 7 downloads, 10 downloads, and that was it. Nobody cared. And that's because it's a niche show, like super niche. I didn't have a large audience. And so it's going to take time. Like I started the show to get views on social media.
Yeah.
That was my number one play. So we did a whole episode about that. But I think by being that level of transparent, it's more relatable to people because I'm not hiding my numbers. I'm not going to, oh, well, I'm a podcast producer. Clearly I have these big numbers. No, it's hard to build a show. I've got a very specific lane. It's going to be hard.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
so let's talk about that. Like, let's go into that. I'll tell you exactly what I'm thinking, why I'm doing it, what the strategy is, how those things are working, and let's get to the results. So I try to be, like fully behind the scenes, fully transparent, and aggressively figuring out the best ways for people to do this. That's really what the show is.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to sort of have it tie into the business as well, because I think transparency with podcasting, I think, is something that doesn't really exist as much as it should. When you talk about numbers, downloads, like I think that's something that you don't really hear a lot of people talking about. Like, because I actually kind of went through the sort of similar thing very recently. Like I was very close to 1,000 total plays, total downloads, within my first year, and I was just like, that was my goal right from the very beginning. And then whether it's low or not, it's all relative. It doesn't matter to me, but that was the goal, and and that was the kind of thing I was transparent and open to that about that with people. And I think it's kind of important because, like, people don't need to compare because, like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't necessarily make it a success or not. Like, it's just something that you do for whatever reason it may be, and like as long as some people are hearing it, some people or the right people are hearing it, then like natural growth will kind of will come with that. So would you use the podcast then as like a sort of tool for your clients coming in who are maybe kind of new to podcasting as well, and like kind of to help them see the sort of relatable side of podcasting? It's like, okay, this is the reality of it. When you get in, you might get 5 downloads in your first episode kind of thing, but don't be disheartened.
Yeah, I try to be honest with people about where it's at and what the strategy is and how it's a long-term building thing, because the show itself is only one part of it. You're a full ecosystem. You have to be on all of these different channels all the time, and most of the people aren't on social media, or rather not on the podcast. Like they're on these different social media platforms. So you want to be at those places, you want to be visible, and you want to consistently grow. And that's all it is. It doesn't need to be massive growth. It's not viral growth. It's just people are hearing this. You're doing it strategically in a way that you're getting in front of the right people. And enough of those people who are the right people agree with you and are sticking around and hopefully telling somebody. So that's it. And as long as you're doing those things, because for me, at the end of the day, I got more clients. Like if you're going to look at my client list between October and now, I've got more clients, and I'm starting to get better clients, like higher quality people, bigger businesses, deeper pockets, better projects. So I am growing, and the kinds of people that I'm working with is getting better. And that's a really cool thing. But they're still starting from a place of they don't necessarily have a massive audience, and it's still, for whatever it is, relatively, it's probably going to be a smaller play than they think. Like, let me give you a funny story, actually. Yeah. So I was looking today. Occasionally, I look for contracts on Upwork because you get some big clients and people who they need help with podcasting, so that's where they post the jobs. So great. I'm on Upwork. I see this one show that makes a post saying that they're expecting to get 1 million downloads for their show. Which already is super ambitious for a new show. They want to get 1 million downloads for it, and it's in the nonprofit space, this show. There's no way in hell they're going to get that many downloads. Like, I would bet my life that show, I don't care who's hosting it, I don't care what it looks like, they're not going to get that many downloads. And that's the delusion that a lot of people have. So I do try to be clear up front of, it's not a bit like numbers are great, and we'll get numbers, like we're working to grow these numbers, but are you getting more clients? Are you building relationships with the right kind of people? Are you setting yourself up to be in the networks of the people that can be your customer? And as long as you're doing those things, that's the goal. So it's really everything that I try to distill is in that. And I want to be honest with these people up front, because false expectations don't help anybody.
No, absolutely not. And like, networking within podcasting is something that is huge. It's something that I didn't really realize was as important a thing as it actually is. And to a degree, I think it's like so slept on, because especially when you have whenever you have like a interview based podcast, you have guests on and stuff, but you're interviewing the people as they are, who people have a podcast, but you're not interviewing like a collective. It's not like a sort of cross promotional type thing. It's sort of it's yeah, like, and that's not something that I kind of realized this well until I joined Podmatch actually back in March. Like at accident, I seen the amount of people who kind of did a similar thing to what I'm doing, to what like you're doing and everybody else, and it's like it was almost an eye opening thing. When you see the amount, there's so many more people doing this who, when you meet people, like the doors that it opens, like, and obviously that's like the kind of message that you're sort of trying to send with SBX, and monetizing, getting more people, more eyes on people's products and services and things like that.
Yeah, relationship building is everything. It's if you bring somebody on the show, you have a good conversation with them, and you genuinely care about what they're doing, you show a real interest in it, they'll want to stay in touch.
Yeah.
It's really that simple. And what happens when you build relationships like that consistently over time for a year, 3 years, 5 years, the things that people grow into and the kinds of people they meet, and to maintain that relationship. I mean, every time I have somebody on the show, for me, I connect with them on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Every time they come on my show. And more often than not, when I'm on shows, I'll reach out to people after the show and go like, that was a great episode. I'm going to reach out to this person on LinkedIn. So for me, it's, yeah, I like what they're doing. I want to keep up with it. And I'll go out of my way to like their stuff once in a while. Or if there's a reason to comment and I have something to say, I'll go comment on those things. Because, yeah, you just never know what kind of opportunity you're going to create. And I do like the person, and I'm engaged in what they do. So, yeah, like it just makes your life so much easier and better. You know more people, you've had more experience, you've had cool conversations like that. It just adds layers to who you are and what you do. So yeah, networking's everything.
Oh yeah, 100%, 100%. Vince, so it has been an absolute pleasure having you on Behind the Camera with Andy Games. Thank you so much for your time. I would just like to give you the floor just before we wrap up. Just where can the audience find you? SBX and everything. The floor is yours.
So yeah, if anybody wants to connect with me, the easiest way to do it is follow the show. It's Not Just Talking with Vince Quinn. It's on every major podcast platform. It's also on YouTube. So, which is a major podcast platform, as much as like podcast diehards try to tend to fight that movement for some reason. They're very resistant and gatekeepy about YouTube, but it's a podcast platform. Go find me on there. So it's Not Just Talking. Go check it out.
Amazing. Yes. Vince, once again, thank you so much for your time. It has been a pleasure having you on Behind the Camera with Andy Games. And yeah, all the best for the future.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you having me. It's a great conversation, honestly. I really enjoyed it.
No, me too. Thank you again. And there you have it. That brings us to the end of episode 44 of Behind the Camera with Andy Games. A big thank you to Vince Quinn for sharing his story with us today, especially his insights on the radio industry on both a local and national level, and an insight into podcast production. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to follow, leave a review, or share it with somebody who'd appreciate these stories. Your support means the world. Until next time, take care, stay creative, and I'll see you soon. But until then, peace.